Oh, I know what you're doing.
Do you think it's showing? Oh wait, it's showing on mine. We're good.
Okay.
Okay, all set. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the April 4th, 2024 meeting of the Lower Downtown Design Review Commission. We'll get started this morning with some introductions. Start, Andy. Oh,
Andy
sorry.
Duckett Imke.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Can you state the time?
Yes, I'm sorry. It is 8:34 a.m. We'll start with introductions.
Okay. Andy Duckett Imke, Preservation Architect.
Nick Allen, Development Manager at Revesco Properties.
Okay, Heather Vasquez Johnson, Practicing Architect and Chair.
Amy Sanborn, Preservation Architect.
Jim Grazier, resident.
And I'm Brittany Bryant, Denver Landmark Preservation staff.
Okay, before we get started this morning, for anybody who is joining us virtually, there are audio tips up on the screen. It looks like we have our applicants here in person this morning. So we may not have any joining us virtually, but if there's any members of the public or anyone else listening on, if you've got issues with sound, please reference the screen for some options. If you are going to be speaking, if you're presenting or a public commenter, when it's your turn to speak, the microphone icon at the bottom of the screen will mute and unmute you. And expanding that menu will give you additional options to test your speaker and microphone devices. And then if you still have challenges, please switch to phone for audio. Okay, getting started first thing this morning, we have a meeting record to review. Anybody have any comments or need to pull that off, corrections for staff? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so the meeting record can be approved as is. So we'll get started this morning with design review. The process is up there on the screen. I will go ahead and announce each of the design review items by their item number and their address. If any commission members have a conflict of interest, they will announce it and exit the room. Staff will introduce the application, give their recommendation and presentation. At that time, commissioners can ask questions of staff. Afterwards, we'll have an applicant presentation. These are both limited to 10 minutes today, 15. So we have 15 minutes today. And then after that applicant presentation, the commissioners are able to ask questions of the applicant. We will open it up, take public comment. If you are on the Zoom and would like to speak about a project and you're not part of the applicant team, please raise the hand raise button in order to alert staff that you would like to speak about it. And if that is not working, you can send an email to landmark@denvergov.org. We'll follow up after public comment with any staff clarifications, open commission deliberation, and end it with a commission motion and vote. So our first item today is item number 2020-COA-023 for 1420 Wine Coop Street, pending the ask. Jesse?
Okay, so this is 1420 Wine Coop Street. It is a vacant lot that's bordered on the west by Wine Coop Street. Switched it up there for you. On the east by Wazee Street and on the north by 1430 Wine Coop Street, which is a contributing structure to the Lower Downtown Historic District. And it is also bordered on the south by Cherry Creek. The applicant was approved for a phase 1 mass form and context in September 5th, 2019. And phase 2 design details on February 6th, 2020. The applicant later requested review of revisions to the 2020 approval on October 5th, 2023, November 2nd, 2023, and March 7th of 2024. The applicant was denied on October 5th and was approved on November 2nd. On the March 7th meeting, the commission continued the application, citing the following concerns. One, dealing with the arcade and first floor. The commission stated that the context for arcades is to offer public connection and felt that the revised arcade compromised the vibrant pedestrian-friendly arcade area. The commission, after some deliberation, ultimately noted that their concerns as a friendly comment, with the understanding that further discussion about the arcade would take place with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, also known as DOTI. 2 slider doors. The commission stated that the slider doors were not contextual and that swing doors should be used on the structure. 3 east recessed balconies on levels 2 through 4. The commission stated that they felt that the balconies gave the corner of the elevation a cavernous appearance and that the balconies eroded the corner of the building. And then 4, drawing correction. This was just a minor thing. The commission requested that the applicant correct the east elevation to show the new windows on the east wall of the northwest bump out. So the applicant has revised their application based on the commission's deliberation at the March 7th meeting. And Landmark staff have reviewed those revisions and are recommending conditional approval of the application citing guidelines 5.3.3. And I'm going to spend the next few slides going over our findings and recommendations. So pictured here is the March 7th ground floor proposal and the current proposal. The applicant has chosen to keep the arcade and patio layout on the south side of the building, the same as the March 7th application, with the understanding that additional review may take place with DOTI. And then pictured here is the ground floor proposal and the current ground floor, the March 7th ground floor proposal and the current ground floor proposal. The applicant has apologies. Let me back up here. So this is the second floor. So this is the second floor proposal, the March 7th and the current. For levels 2 through 4, the applicant will be maintaining the recessed and projecting balconies on the north, south, and west elevations per the commission's deliberation on March 7th meeting. The applicant has adjusted the size and placement of the recessed balcony on the east elevation as indicated by the green arrows. The new recessed balconies will be shifted south from the corner 18 feet 8 inches. And that's from the northeast corner for clarification there. And the size of the balcony will be reduced from 20 feet wide by 6 foot 11 deep, which was in the March 7th application, to 16 feet 4 inches wide and 6 feet deep. An overall reduction of 4 feet in width and 11 inches in depth. So pictured here are just elevations showing that east proposal, the March 7th and the current proposal. So the balconies are highlighted by the green boxes. The current proposals shows the balconies that are flanked by windows with configurations similar to the window configurations elsewhere on the building. The applicant feels that the addition of windows at the corner will help to reinforce the building's base at the northeast corner. Staff still have concerns over the balcony on the east elevation, as the balcony size still exceeds the guideline preference for balconies, which is 10 feet by 5 feet. And additionally, staff feel that the commission's comments about the cavernous appearance of the balconies on a highly visible facade have not been properly addressed. So going back to that second floor plan, this is again that March 7th and current proposal. The applicant has shifted the windows on the north side of the northeast corner as indicated by the blue arrows. They've shifted these more towards the street to create more symmetry at the northeast corner of the building. And then here you can see the March 7th and current proposal with those windows highlighted in blue. They've shifted those forward so that they are more towards the corner in the hopes of better anchoring that corner along Wazi. So one last item on floors 2 through 4 are the new west elevation windows on the northeast bump out. I've highlighted these windows with a blue arrow on the floor plan in the upper left-hand corner of the slide, and the blue boxes on the elevations and section drawings on the right side of the screen. So staff would like to amend their previous condition that these windows be shown in elevation as they are clearly shown in that section drawing, and staff feel comfortable with the proposed single punched openings as they do match other window openings on the structure. And then here is the 7th floor proposal and March 7th floor plan. For levels 2 through 7, the applicant is increasing the window depth on the north elevation by 1 foot, very minimal alteration there. And that's indicated by the red box. And they are also altering all the sliding doors per the commission's deliberation into swing doors and casement windows. And those are indicated by the blue boxes. So pictured here is that north elevation showing the proposed increase in window slide size and the alteration of the slider doors into swing doors and casement windows. And then here is the west elevation, also showing the alteration of those slider doors. And I don't know if you can see my mouse. So we're on this setback corner here into swing doors. Okay, so going back to that 7th floor plan, for levels 6 through 7, the applicant has increased the depth of the east and south partially recessed balconies. The March application showed a depth of 8 feet 1 inches for the east balconies as indicated by the red boxes, and 7 feet 10 inches for the south balconies as indicated by the blue boxes. That depth has been increased slightly to 8 feet 3 inches on the east balconies and 8 foot on the south balconies. Staff weren't overly concerned with the increase in depth by 2 inches, as it would be very minimally noticeable from the previous iteration. And here's just some elevations that are showing those balconies. And as you can see, there's not much change there, so we weren't very concerned with it. So finally, these are some proposed renderings for the design. Landmark staff is recommending conditional approval of the application citing design guideline 5.3.3 and is requesting that the east balconies on floors 2 through 4 not exceed the 10 foot by 5 foot guideline.
Thank you, Jesse. And any commissioners have questions for staff? Invite the applicant to take a seat. And again, if you could start with name and address for the record.
Absolutely.
And you'll have 15 minutes, Nate.
Jesse, well, that I did, is that just following this on the
I
slides?
have it.
She has it.
One
She'll put it
second.
up.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Nate Jenkins. I'm a principal at Oz Architecture. And great. Proceed. Hi, good morning. My name is Nate Jenkins. I'm with Oz Architecture, principal there. And I've been working on 1430 Wynkoop for the better part of 10 years. So appreciate all of your time this morning. The focus of our presentation today is largely a derivative of the last conversation that we've had together. And in the sense of comfort that we got from your feedback on many of the proposed changes that we represented, where we're focusing our attention today is largely that WASI elevation and its appropriateness relative to its context. So if we could please go to the next slide. At its core, what we're trying to do is establish relative adjacency and context, contextual appropriateness. And within 300 feet of our site, we do have 4 buildings, 1450 Wynkoop, 1435 WASI, which we would be looking at, and the 2 buildings, 1628, 1616, 14th, all of which have balconies that are below the 55-foot datum in cases, in varying cases and in varying dimensions, exceed the depth of 5 feet and the width of 10. So we've also added a few of the other buildings that have recently been built, one across the street along Wynkoop, where there are those exceptions as well. Good, please. This just allows you to see where the relative context of those, the most striking, I say, is the West End Lofts item noted as number 3 there along WASI, and its frontage to what's our north elevation. Good, please. Just another vantage point of those same balconies and adjacencies. Just gonna fly through here. I'll try to be quick. And then also some of these admittedly are on side interior or rear lot lines, and so we're not seeing it as a like for like, but just we just like to throw out where the context may justify some of the moves that we're making. Building at the lower left, 1628 would be side interior. However, 1616 does front spear. Okay, please. And then these are just buildings that are new, but do have, whether it's any outie balconies or protruding balconies that are below 55 feet or do exceed 5 and 10 by depth and width. Speaking. And this is a view of the WASI frontage that's looking south to west, if you could, showing the buildings that are contributing and the balconies that exceed those stated preferences are not in this view, admittedly, but I guess you can partly see the one on the bottom lower right, item number 5 there. If you could. And then this just walks you through some of the evolutions of our design. The prior that was presented to you last month did have it at the corner. I think it was John who noted it seeming to erode the base in a way that we felt we needed to address, and we believe we've studied this in several different ways, whether it's widening or relocating the recessed balcony that we'd like to have, just from a practicality and livability, functional livability perspective of what will be Denver's newest condominium building. The one thing at the bottom left that we wanted to note was there's a column conflict, and having that sort of reveal we felt was mildly inappropriate. And then we did look at doing what was a sort of breakfast nook or atria sort of space that's glass and then has high degrees of operability, but that presented a number of different challenges, the least of which was establishment of a new window pattern and rhythm that was deviant from the long aligned and positioned window pattern that's appropriate to the context. So we felt like that there was a conflict there, and then the support of that operability would introduce a new member that we didn't feel was appropriate. So if you could go to the next slide, this is representing what we feel is the coalescence of your feedback and our functional desires, holding the base, reintroducing that balcony, but positioning it almost, it's centered over the drive entry, but more specifically, or perhaps more appropriately, it fits within the pattern and the rhythm flow of the bay spacing and the articulation of that lower masonry mass. It happens to also align with the balconies that do project and sort of serve as an innie-outie on the upper floor space within the setback area. That's it. If you could, thank you very much. I guess this was just a representation of that where those windows would reside, that were noted in the brief, but that Jesse has noted as being acceptable based on this information. Thank you.
Thank you. Any commission members have questions for the applicant?
Can you comment a little on the materiality of the underside of the balconies and the lighting, the intention behind lighting?
Sure. That's a very fair question. Our lighting and landscape submission will be coming, and this would be, the lighting aspect of this would be addressed, will be addressed in that, and that's site-wide. In terms of the materiality, we looked at it as steel, and it felt way too cavernous. We looked at it as masonry, and it felt inauthentic to what the purpose of the masonry is serving as a base. And so we're seeing it as just a hard lid, bright colored finished treatment. It'd be stucco, or if it's not stucco, it could be a light colored metal panel. Something quite durable, and obviously of the quality of the building as a whole represents, but that's a good point, Nick.
What's the height of the lowest projecting balcony?
The height of the lowest projecting balcony on the building as a whole? Sorry,
Yes.
we do not have balconies projecting, no, that's not true. On the southwest corner facing Wynkoop, we have balconies that go all the way to level 2. Where the glass mass interacts with the brick. So I guess that would be shown on there. So that SG-M2 VG combination represents balconies that go all the way to the ground.
Gotcha. Only in that corner.
Or I'm sorry, all the way to level 2 in the arcade.
Are there any further questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we have anybody from the public wanting to comment?
If you're here for the public, if you could use the hand raise function on Zoom or *9. If you're having any issues, you can also email landmark@denvergov.org. And I don't know why my PowerPoint is freezing. But it is.
Can I? Yeah, we've got public comment here in person.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
I was just
Could
wondering,
you, I'm sorry, could you start with your name and address, please, for the record?
my name is Livonia Parham and I'm at 155 South Yuma Street. And when I look up my property, where I live at, is not pulling up, it's pulling that butler thing. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what I'm doing. So that's kind of going towards where we're at. And when you said something about the lower level, it looked like that they're facing where we're at by Southwest. We have some opportunities to grow, but I don't know how to really do what I gotta do, so I'm gonna keep searching. But, so I was just wondering what we included in any of that development.
Okay, is that kind of a question for the staff or for the
Or just-
applicant or?
I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know this is my first time even speaking with you guys, so. And I can't get to my Zoom or anything, so.
Where's your property located, Tanya?
Or it's a it's a Denver housing property, but I've been working, trying to get some things together with what they got going on over there, but it's on, Yuma Street.
That is not within the lower downtown
Okay,
historic district, so I'm not specifically familiar with.
there are some things that are getting jumped back and forth. Good at that. But, I'm just trying to figure out where everything is going and how this works. I'm changing my
Yeah.
profession, so I don't know.
Perhaps we can help you a little bit more after the meeting.
Okay, sounds like fun. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there was nobody on Zoom, Taylor? Okay, so I will open up for deliberation.
I was just going to staff follow up here.
Thank you,
You know,
Jessie.
staff made the recommendation about the size because the commission had quite a bit of deliberation in the last meeting about the cavernous appearance of the balcony on the east side facing on Tawazi. I know several examples were provided showing balconies in this historic district that are larger and below 55 feet. But most of those appear to be projecting or on secondary elevations that are not on a street facing facade. And really the intent of staff's condition was to address that cavernous appearance, and maybe by reducing that size, they could maybe lessen the cavernous appearance on this east facade that's street facing and so close to the street. In the last commission meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion that there's many different approaches, but using the guidelines, that's the recommendation that staff was making.
Thank you, Jessie. What does everybody think?
Are the balcony guidelines purely a plan dimension? Is there consideration for the elevation too? I know it just says 10 by 5, and maybe this is an open-ended discussion, but our thoughts on balconies being broken up in a way that might have dimensions that are within that 10 feet, but not necessarily, but perhaps in plan the balconies larger. I'm just thinking through what Nate had presented as potential opportunities that I'm interested to know everybody's thoughts on how prescriptive we think that 10 by 5 wants to be. And I'm new to all this, so I'm just kind of, I wasn't privy to last week.
You can just jump into this without the last conversation.
I know, but yeah, welcome to it.
Just to be clear, it is a preference, it's not a requirement.
Which means you do have flexibility
Sure.
to interpret per this discussion.
Well, maybe you all discussed, can enlighten this last month a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of wish from, I forgot who's sitting next to me, but the conversation, to bring you up to speed, Nick, was that the problem or the difficulty, the challenge of the prescriptive dimensions and the guidelines produces or creates a situation where the balcony becomes kind of just not totally usable. And
That was some of the discussion, and I think in this property, in this application in particular, when we discussed last month, primarily kind of the larger balconies that are above on the recessed portion, and it's level 6 and up, that the feeling on those was that was more cohesive with the architecture and the bay spacing and the windows and the things that had already been established on the upper section, and it felt appropriate. And because that was recessed back, there was room for more flexibility, because they're, especially as you perceive them, thinking along the creek elevation in particular, you're going to be at a much lower elevation, and you really aren't going to be able to see them unless you're standing all the way across Spear and looking back. And so that was a lot of the discussion, is that I felt appropriate with the building architecture, and because they were higher up and they were a bit more elevated. And there was discussion about like usability and things like that with the larger balcony.
So I appreciate the exploration. It was good to see the options that you'd explored as well, so thanks for that context. Personally, I appreciate the fact that it's moved off the corner, that the corner is now intact with those two windows. I think that does a lot to hold the mass. I have no problem with the dimension of the balconies. Personally, I think the usability is a critical factor. The difference between, say, 6 or 7 feet and 5 in terms of that perception on the street to me is, I don't think is consequential, particularly with a light soffit, which does feel quite important in terms of keeping that sense of openness and lightness to the opening. And the width, to me, it feels more important that it locks up with the building grid and the building grid retains its integrity than we try and sort of force a dimension into it that's off.
Yeah.
So personally, I think the integrity of the mass is reinstated by virtue of that corner, which I think is strong. I know we've done a lot of work to get those other openings onto the property line too. So I think that sort of grid is feeling nicely intact, and I think it's more important that it stays with the portion of the building. So I personally am good with the way that it's shown here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the mass of the east elevation kind of base block is a lighter brick. Feels a lot better having that balcony shifted off the corner. It just feels more solid. I think the proportions of it are nicer.
Yeah, I was just gonna echo on your comments, and that the way I'm reading this building now is it feels like it's, I'm gonna get the dimensions wrong, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A 6-story blonde brick building on one side and a 4-story blonde brick on the other side. And it repeats the window and grid pattern, as you were saying, that kind of helps fit into the district nicely. And I think moving those balconies off of the corner does help keep that intact. And I think if we start playing with that, reducing that size, it's gonna throw the grid pattern off. And I feel like, and I was just, doodling this last night, it's like reducing the grid pattern throws off the grid, the pattern of that facade, that it may fit the guidelines because they're smaller, but then it doesn't retain its rhythm. It took me about 20 more extra words to say that. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think the projecting balconies on the west elevation there, don't really bother me because they're slipped back beyond the primary facade. They're not even really visible directly from the street unless you're directly perpendicular to that facade.
Yeah, and Amy, I don't think you were here
I
last
wasn't,
month,
yeah.
but generally the commission didn't have an issue with those
Okay,
projecting balconies on the west, kind of for that reason, because they're
Okay,
kind of
gotcha.
tucked back into that notch in the
Yeah.
corner.
that makes sense.
I think kind of after the deliberation last week, kind of the biggest thing that we were not sure how to solve was this recess balcony on the
Okay.
lower level, just on
Yeah.
the east. And it looks like the applicant has addressed the other concerns that we had about elevating those windows and then changing the sliders. So
Okay.
I would suggest to say, the entire package is up for review again, but I would kind of suggest to say that the big issue of discussion is that recess balcony on the east side.
I agree with what you said. As far as the modularity, I think playing with that too much would put the greater composition at risk.
Yeah, going back to my undergraduate days, like you've got the rhythm, you've got the big window on the south corner and it goes A, B, A, B, A, B, and then you've got we'll call it a C, and then back to A, B, A, B. And if you start playing with it, then you're gonna throw a D in there right at the window, and I think that's gonna be more distracting than keeping that width.
And in regards to the depth, I did mention it to Brittany after the commission meeting last week. But that I do think that preference of a 5-foot depth is something that we probably need to update as we continue to update guidelines. Within, looking at the plans, they haven't identified which kind of units are slated to be accessible, but the current accessibility guidelines have a larger turn radius that you can't accommodate in a 5-foot depth. So I think just from a code standpoint, that we will have to adjust that preference in a future iteration of the.
Yeah, it feels like maybe some more
Guidelines.
qualitative language around sort of principles versus just strict dimensions would be a good approach to balconies, because so many buildings have different grids that almost feels like it wants to be able to be tuned to what the building is in terms of content. With anybody anybody else got any comments? So I'm happy to make a motion.
Sure, if you want to make a motion.
I move to approve with conditions, I move to approve application 2020 COA 023 for the revisions to phase 2 design details submission for new construction at 1420 Coop Street as per design policy standards and guidelines 5.3.2, 5.3.3, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, John. Do we have a second? Thank you, Amy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay, it passes unanimously. Congratulations. Okay, moving on, the next item on our agenda today for design review is item number 2024 COA 174, 1709 Blake Street, the Red House Hotel. Crystal?
So this application is for a phase 2 infill proposal for a new hotel located at 1709 Blake Street, which is currently a vacant lot, as you can see here. The proposal will also utilize an existing contemporary structure, the Red House Hotel, or I'm sorry, the Red House at 1702 Wazee Street for additional uses, such as a restaurant, bar, and meeting spaces for this new hotel development. I've largely left out 1702 Wazee out of this presentation as there's no visible exterior changes to the structure proposed. Only an internal glass canopy structure is proposed to be covering that interior courtyard on that structure. So here you can see photos of the vacant lot for the new hotel, and at the top right, you can see 1702 Wazee Street behind the Jack's Fish House. The proposed new structure, the Red House Hotel, will be located at the corner of 17th and Blake, and the proposals for 115 room, 7-story hotel. Revisions to the phase 1 approval of this design include the addition of a rooftop structure and amenity for the hotel, and changes to the porte cochere adjacent to the alley along 17th Street. So here's the new, here's the site plan for the new proposal. The new hotel will be located, like I said, at the corner of 17th and Blake, which you can see here on the right. And you can also see that they've added that rooftop amenity here as well, which we'll get into more later. So here you can see the proposed redesign for the reconfigured porte cochere, which is here. The applicants have changed the entrance to be taken from the alley instead of adding a new curb cut as proposed in the phase 1 approval. Additionally, to the right, you can see the new roof plan for the proposed roof terrace and mechanical area. So here you can see the proposed materials for the 17th Street elevation. Instead, at the left is the previously approved phase 1 mass and form. Just for some context, the new structure uses traditional brick materials that will be left natural and will not be painted, as well as a metal and glass curtain wall system at the primary facades facing onto 17th Street and Blake Street. All materials are high quality and durable, meeting policy 6.2 and its recommendations. Here at the 17th Street elevation, the brick module nearest the alley, you can see here, lacks a brick vertical pilasters connecting this module to the ground, like the previous approval and like brick modules at the rest of the structure, which interrupts the continuity of those brick pilasters. Staff does understand why it may not be feasible at the alley corner of the structure due to the porte cochere. However, staff would recommend adding a brick pilaster connecting the brick module to the ground, matching other brick modules on the structure near the vestibule main entrance at the lobby. That location is circled here in green. Per policy 5.1, street walls states that the continuity of facades along the streets must reinforce the tradition of Lower Downtown's historic building fabric. The vestibule and main entrance on 17th Street are slightly recessed from the storefront face, though it was unclear in the plans how far, so staff would recommend the applicant add those dimensions to the floor plans showing it is 5 feet or less from the property line per design guideline 5.1.1. So here's a closer detail showing the open area where the porte cochere is located at the 17th Street elevation. The applicant has reconfigured from that phase 1 porte cochere street entrance to eliminate the need for a new curb cut. However, leaving this bay open to the street to see the porte cochere is now proposed. The applicants have added a stone bench and seating area adjacent to the porte cochere at this elevation and have framed it with continued mullion lines above, mimicking the storefront elevations while allowing visibility for the reconfigured porte cochere area. So here again, you can see the Blake Street elevation for the new structure using material, the traditional brick material, and again, that metal and glass curtain wall system. Again, all materials are high quality and durable. Here you can also see that balconies are not a dominant feature of the street front facades and will only be located at the top 2 floors above 55 feet and will have transparent railings. Balcony length and widths have not been dimensioned on the floor plans. However, they do not appear to be more than 5 feet in depth, though the corner balconies do appear to potentially be longer than 10 feet in length. However, they are only located on the 7th floor and set back more than 11 feet from the front facade, so will not be highly visible from public vantage points and may be acceptable in this instance. The facade design will include vertical elements and other architectural features that have been inspired by the district context. For example, the windows having that vertical articulation through the use of center mullions and window alignments on the facade. The windows and courses are clearly delineated in a modern way that relates to the district context, meeting policy 5.3 for facade compositions. The new structure uses expressive architectural elements such as decorative soldier courses at the top of the windows on the brick portions of the structure, as well as stone caps at the simple brick parapet. A simple combination of varied materials also helps to define different architectural elements, like at the top 2 floors that will largely be clad in aluminum and glass. Those are punctuated by these weathered steel portals, which you can see here and here. With surrounds and this knife edge metal, which is kind of hard to see here, but it's right here. Composite roof line over the balconies, meeting policy 6.1. And here is the alley elevation. The main material here is a black metal panel system with brick wrapping from the 17th Street elevation to the alley. The black metal panel system does blend in and is compatible with the materials of the primary facades. And then here you can see the new hotel rooftop amenity that was added in phase 2. It does appear to be less than 15 feet tall, though no height dimensions were shown on the plans that were submitted. However, the applicant submitted revised drawings to me yesterday, so I just kind of made a snippet here so you can see what those dimensions are, just to clarify what they are. Staff is requesting that the plans be updated to show the height of the rooftop amenity at 15 feet or less, and showing that it meets the roof coverage of the one-third of the roof deck. A 15-foot step back does appear to be met, though it's not clear if it does meet for the alley elevation. So staff would ask for dimensions to be added to the roof plan to show the 15-foot step back is met at the street and alley elevations. The rooftop structure does appear to be compatible with the rest of the building. So finally, we're just gonna go over some renderings. This is the proposal starting with the alley elevation. Here you can see the brick wrapping. Here's the rendering showing the structure looking towards the corner of 17th and Blake Street. And then finally, here are 2 renderings on the 17th Street elevation and showing that porte cochere area here along next to the alley. So the proposed infill structure reads as 5 stories at the street, has a strong street presence, and anchors the corner of 17th and Blake using brick and storefront cladding materials commonly found in the district, and vertical articulation techniques that match the character of the district. Therefore, staff is recommending approval with the following conditions. One, to add dimensions to the roof plan showing that 15-foot inset of all rooftop structures and that the rooftop amenity does not exceed 15 feet in height per design guideline 4.1.0.3. Two, to add dimensions showing that the 17th Street vestibule here is 5 feet or less from the property line per design guideline 5.1.1. And third, at the 17th Street elevation, at the brick module closest to the alley, this one here, to add a brick pilaster connecting the brick module to the ground near 17th Street entrance, matching other brick modules on the structure.
Thank you, Crystal. Does anybody have any questions for staff?
Sorry, I think I need my prescription updated. What was the dimension on the rooftop there? Was it 12 feet?
Yeah, it looked
Okay,
like it was
thanks.
12 feet in height and they were showing it was set back 15 feet, but I'm not sure if it's from all elevations. We just need clarification on that.
Question, does this property include the former bar and grill at 17 and Wine Coop?
I don't think so.
Does it or does it not?
I think that's a good clarification for the applicant and they present.
Current Jack's Fish House.
Oh, it doesn't appear so. They've only shown the red house as part of their development, which is the interior structure, not Jack's. But yeah, you might want to ask
So
them.
Jack's is not included even in the corner view, which shows it clearly.
I'm not sure if it's included in the views, but it's not in any way connected to their development.
It's shown as a white box, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a note on the drawings, it's not part of this project
Yeah.
or something.
It's not included.
No. And then question,
Mhm.
I know that we received a letter from the district about the red house. Is the red house individually landmarked? It's totally outside of our purview.
It's like a contemporary structure.
That's why I just wanted to clarify, to make
Yes.
sure that it was.
One of your comments is at the suggestion of a pilaster. Do you have a specific kind of width you're
I would say
suggesting,
just to
or
match the others on the structure. Not any specific.
but like a single?
Yeah.
A single column or multiple?
No, just a
Okay.
single one to match the other brick modules on the structure.
Okay.
Any other questions for Crystal? Thanks, Crystal. At this time, we invite the applicant to come up. As soon as Brittany gets your presentation ready to go. You'll have 15 minutes, and again, start with name and address for the process.
Good morning. Nice to see you all again. It's been a year, not 10 years as the previous applicant, so that's we're a little more recent than that. So a quick introduction. My name is David Morris. I'm a principal with the Vet Group and lead designer on the Red House and the Red House Hotel. Joining me today is our development team, Melissa Rummel, Robbie Nichols, Brian Lidke, and then my partner, Doug Spuler, who's the managing principal for that. So quick introductions. I know address. I'll give you my office address, 1001 17th Street in Denver. Yeah, so Crystal, thank you very much for your thorough review and also explanation of the project. So maybe just to reset things to some of the committee members that were not present. I know there's some new faces around the table last time we presented. Certainly our overall approach to the project is certainly a lot of time spent, talking context and what context means in this location, and then the appropriate approach to what we wanted to do with the building. So primarily the overall concept is that this is basically a masonry box, if you will, that is broken up with these locations within the facades of called steel detailing. Brick being obviously a historic material that's very present in the district. Our idea of these metal and steel locations is harkening back, paying homage to the old cast iron, wrought iron type facades that you see in the district as well in the lower downtown area. Our idea is to use historic materials, solid materials are gonna last. And then the contemporary spin that we put on it is the way that these materials are detailed as well as how they're implemented within the overall composition. Go to the next, thank you. So again, you've already reviewed this. So just to really touch briefly on the overall materials without getting too specific, the overall mass is a traditional red brick. It's a brick that we have up here. I'd love to have you all look at. It's got different hues within that, so it has a little bit of a modeling to it that we're trying to establish, which is the primary masonry that we use in the building. Along the back side, on the alley side, and up on the roof deck, we will go to a darker gray or almost black onyx masonry. The way we are treating the brick in its detail is we are looking at what used to be more of a traditional way of handling the mortar joints. We're looking at raking those joints back, which, as you all know, exposes more of the face, you get more of a continuous expression of the material rather than focusing on joinery. So that's a little bit of the contemporary detail that we're planning on using on the masonry units themselves. The metal that you see in the center, mentioned harkening back to wrought iron details of the past. We like that expression. We think it breaks down the facade on both the Lake Street facade as well as 17th Street facade. Our contemporary spin on that is rather than using what we typically used in the past, which was an extruded section where you get the rolled condition and the concave as you come in the inside of like the beams, or the horizontal where we have it at the floor lines. We are looking at doing a built-up section, so it'd be done with steel plate, so you get a very crisp detail, and you don't have that rolled sense of that extruded metal from the past. So a little more contemporary spin on that. The hoods or the portals, or we call them the saddlebags, up on levels 6 and 7. Actually, it's a material that we are looking to use there is a weathered steel. So I know that we often kind of go to that expression of Corten. We're not thinking Corten specifically, we're thinking more of a weathered steel, and we've updated our renderings that we would like to show you those in a bit here that shows a deeper, more rich material rather than this more orange that's expressed in these earlier renderings. The elevation has changed quite considerably from what we submitted to you all last time. Part of that was due to the reconfiguration of the guest rooms where we needed to have glazing. Also from a code standpoint, fire separation to the adjacency properties across the alley, we had to reduce the amount of glass. But we still have large punched openings. These punched openings are expressed a little bit differently than we do on the other primary facades, and that it's about a 7-foot wide by 8-foot tall window. So it's more of a square proportion, still being vertical, but more of a square proportion to the windows that we have in the masonry, which are a 4 by 8, and more of a significant vertical expression. You see, as Crystal mentioned earlier, we are wrapping the masonry down the alley so that the views as you're coming up 17th Street, you still get that solid corner that we were trying to establish. And we think holds that corner, although it's not 17th and Blake, it's a very important corner to the overall composition and development of the project. Go to the next, thank you. This is really, you looked at this earlier, this is the opening into the porte cochere. We've done quite a bit of study here, as Crystal mentioned earlier, because of the view triangle into the alley. The furthest to the right column that comes down to grade is only allowed to be 18 inches by 18 inches. And we are looking at wrapping that and cladding that in a ACM. You can see on the far right, the column or pilaster that Crystal had mentioned. We are pushing back on that slightly. I think our thought, and you'll see it more in one of the later presentation of the perspectives, we're concerned about what we're trying to establish is this dynamic change of the elevation as it moves down the alley. So you'll see at the main entry, which is a glass and steel expression. As you moved into porte cochere, it's that same language. And we feel like introducing that one column coming down on the corner disrupts that formal transition to what we are doing along the alley. The other point that we are trying to protect is that, you know, visual into the lobby space is really important at this corner. At the we don't want to break that with a solid mass there, as well as the visual coming out from that lobby space to 17th Street and the porte cochere. We also feel is very important to keep that free of any masonry column coming down at that location. So we'll talk to that a little bit more here when we get back to the perspectives. So here we are. This is the corner of 17th and Blake. You see how we have the three primary masonry masses along Blake Street. They're very consistent as far as their spacing, the size of the punched openings. We are interrupting that with what I mentioned was the steel and glass portions that indicate at grade is the main entry feature along Blake Street. So there's a little bit of intuitive nature of what happens there. The saddlebags up top on level 6 and 7 all align with those metal portions of the building. And that is consistent as you turn the corner and go down 17th Street. Again, just to refresh everybody, you know, we are very dogmatic, if you will, of the tripartite nature of the building. You have the 18-foot floor at the base that's consistent all the way around. The middle portion, obviously, up to level 6 and 7, which is our, what we called last time we met you, the modern interpretation of a cornice. So you see, as Crystal had mentioned earlier, this knife edge that comes out is very dynamic at the corners. We have balconies that are protruding but slightly inset, so they're only protruding on two sides. I will tell you, we have dimensioned those, so we can show you that. They are over the prescribed 10-foot by 5-foot. They're closer to 6 foot in depth, and at the corner locations are closer to 15. We feel like because of the setback being plus almost 12 feet from the face of the property line, that those aren't visual connections from the street level, and we think they're appropriate to size up for what it does from an architectural expression of the corners. And maybe go on. Thank you. Again, this is just looking, we call Project South along Blake Street. So you see the rhythm of the masonry units being interrupted by the steel curtain wall expressions at the two locations. This rendering is a little hard to make out, but I will talk to it briefly. So the steel members, as I talked about earlier, both vertical and horizontal, are built up steel plates. There will be high performance paint on those. So it'll be a very clear, clean detail. The masonry punched openings, you see that we will match that coloration for the mullion system. As Crystal mentioned earlier, we have good depth at those punched openings. A little hard to make out, but it's a 3-strip section at the head condition with soldier coursing, whereas the rest of the brick is laid up in a traditional running bond pattern. This is the primary elevation along 17th Street. So this is the main entry location into the hotel proper. Crystal had mentioned the setback that was expressed at the entry being less than 5 feet. It's just set back enough so that we can swing the door open without encroaching on the property line. So we're 4 feet maximum where those doors are recessed at that location. rehash what Crystal said earlier, taken for the purpose of continuation of the street front, we've taken the mullion expression that is at that lower portion of the building, and we've taken those mullions and wrapped them into the porte cochere, and they actually, you'll see in the next image that they wrap down the alley. So that continues that with that horizontal mullion system. It also sets up where we know that at some point, we're probably gonna have to have a plenum space within that porte cochere. So that first drop and first horizontal from level 2 could be, in all seriousness, louvers at some point, protecting that drop location to keep that conditioned space at level 2. If I could just stay on this one briefly. So this is where the column in question, and we certainly respect the input from landmarks, but feel like what we're trying to do from a formal architectural standpoint is we're bringing this J-shaped element of the entry glass and steel portion and wrapping it down the alley, and feel like this one column on the corner really challenges that expression. And as you look as the alley transitions, the materiality is more of a glass, metal, and steel. We feel like that's more consistent with what we're trying to accomplish as we wrap the alley condition. Running out of time. And here we are on the alley facade. Talk to this, so you see, again, masonry is held up. We continue not only the mullion system that goes down at the lower level, but this canopy that is over the entry, main entry of the lobby space. We also are wrapping that down the alley to give a little bit of scale consideration to the pedestrian zone and vehicular zone along the alley. The more ribbon type windows at level 2, that is a pre-function space that goes to our meeting rooms and conference center. So we're opening up the glazing there just to have a little more dynamic, natural light that comes into that space to make that zone a little bit more habitable and and better for the patrons going into those spaces. We did change the material, as Crystal mentioned. This is a ACM panel. You can see that we're pulling datums off of the mullion system of the windows to help modulate the scale. And then back in the recess portion, we actually transitioned to a metal that is more of a rib type metal that will be flushed out with the mechanical screen up on level 7. So we're just keeping that nice and clean and consistent within that zone there. And then I think this is just a great view to look at to see how all those materials again come together. You can see our adjustments that we've made to the saddle agate material going to more of a weathered material rather than being a true Corten type expression. Some final views of the exterior roof amenity up on level 7.
Thank you.
Time.
Any commissioners have questions for the applicant? Jim?
As a resident, 30-year resident of Lower Downtown, I'm concerned that what I see here is a beautiful new building to be built on a parking lot. What I do not see is any discussion of how that building will comport with, enhance, or not enhance the existing house, which is the last and actually, I believe, the only private residence still left on Wazee Street. I do not see any attention paid at all to the other historic buildings along Wazee Street, which are a remnant of the attempt to build a highway interchange at that location, going from the 1950s. Are we abandoning completely any use of the red house? Are we suggesting that that be raised? We're suggesting that that be made part of the new hotel. And if so, why?
I'd be happy to address that. Yeah, thank you, Jim, for your comments. The Red House is being incorporated as part of this development. And it is designated to be part of an F&B program that will support the hotel. So the idea is that we are going to be developing an atrium space with the current courtyard space that will allow for that expansion of a restaurant, high-end restaurant. At level 2 of the current Red House is conceived to be a spa and potentially some additional meeting rooms that would support the hotel. And our thinking on that was really, we did not want to touch much of the Red House. We appreciate, although it's not a historic structure, it is a structure of historic significance, as you mentioned. The one remaining single residence in all of Lower Downtown. But we are utilizing that as part of the connection to the Red House. We deliberately chose along that alley, a contrasting metal to what's at the Red House, because we did not want to repeat or copy what was done on that out of respect for that existing structure. So again, don't know that that was the right decision, but we felt pretty comfortable that that was the direction we wanted to go.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant?
Quick,
Amy?
sorry, just a quick clarification. On the 17th, I believe it's the 17th Avenue elevation, that staff has some concerns about the pilaster hitting the ground. At the lobby, is the design intent that the glass storefront wall kind of wraps that corner to allow views out from the lobby so that they could see both the porte cochere and what's happening on the street? And that, is there also any kind of glazing in that framed element that's part of the porte cochere along 17th? Or is it just the framing elements that are left open?
Thank you. It is in the porte cochere, just a framing element.
Okay.
The intention is to keep that open. And to your earlier question, we are looking at taking the glazing and turning the corner with glazing. So it is a glazed corner condition.
Okay.
So without any solid, so it is a void. In this rendering, I would suggest certainly that porte cochere looks a little dark. Is the intent that we would do a metal dropped ceiling. Again, I was talking about the plenum space, and it'll be appropriately lit, so it is is inviting and welcoming, and you can see into that space.
And my question was the same one about the soffit, to be honest, just trying to understand what the soffit condition of that was intended to be.
Yeah, John, I think the current thinking is that the soffit condition that we express at the canopy above entry and the way it tracks along would be the same material that we'd be introducing into the porte cochere as well.
Sorry.
What was driving the design of just sort of those framing elements, the kind of open mullions as they are, as opposed to just an open porte cochere?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That's a great question. Our thinking was that it was our attempt to continue the street front and kind of hold that volume so that it wasn't just open, as you said. So it also mentioned earlier that upper mullion, we feel like we were probably gonna have to drop that ceiling in there to get that plenum, and that'd give us a nice demarcation to take louver or a metal panel to cover that drop in the floor slab there.
I'm glad you brought that up. So those louvers potential louvers would only be in that porte cochere area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and to further that, we would probably wrap down the alley as well until you get to that portion where it transitions to the loading zone.
And those louvers would probably be a dark anodized material similar to what you have They're
matching
not
the
gonna be bright
storefront.
pink or
Yeah.
fuchsia. Okay. So the intent is that would kind of blend in with that kind of storefront appearance.
All part of this, yeah, storefront, front expression.
And that would require further review from our office.
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah,
I
I
wanted to
was-
make sure if
I
it came
was
back. you-
Gonna
yeah.
suggest it's not in this package, so changes from this package at least have to go back to
Yeah,
staff, so.
Not
I also
sure.
wanted to lead the designer, it's like, the idea is that it would be subtle and fit in and it wouldn't be a design element.
Yeah, not sure it's something we would necessarily return to the commission for review, but it would require further review, at least at the staff level.
Just as a comment, there may be something beneficial about that bend in terms of giving a little bit more depth at the base of that brick volume. It does feel, I think, by virtue of the perspective and the projection of the canopy, that the kind of thinness of that brick base is a little bit of maybe what's driving this thinking about, do we need to ground it somehow? Whereas maybe a little mass in there at the base might help with the reading of something that's sort of anchoring that.
Is that a question or should we save that
I
for
was gonna say, John,
deliberation?
hold
Yeah,
that,
sorry.
hold that.
Are there any other questions
Thank you so
for
much.
the applicant?
If I could take that as a question, you know, John, we have studied that quite a bit. I think if we felt like we could have additional columns come into grade, that would have been different. It's just the idea of the one at the corner, it feels like it doesn't complete that transition that we were talking about earlier.
Well, that might be a point of clarity. Was the one at the corner the one that the,
That's not what staff was recommending. Staff was recommending the column here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's this one, John.
So
That's
just
what I thought
bringing
too.
this kind of passing down.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, Not seeing any, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any public comment?
Oh, Jim.
Oh,
has
Jim,
a-
you have another applicant question?
I would like to see much more detail of how the red house is going to be incorporated into the final design. I saw absolutely none.
So unless they're making changes to the exterior of the building, we don't really have
Purview.
purview over that.
But we cannot talk about exterior, interior changes.
We don't review the interior, so we don't.
We can only talk about exterior changes.
Well, I think the other point of clarification is, when was the red house built?
In the 80s, wasn't it?
It was outside the period of significance,
It was.
so technically it's not our purview.
In the 90s.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, it was in the
It's
nineties.
not,
Yeah.
it's not.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say late 80s.
Yeah, the reason why I asked is I want to make sure that we clarify that the red house, even though we think it architecturally significant in this body, it's not within our purview.
Well, it is because it's within the district, but they're not.
It's within the
proposing-
district, but I treat it like we've done with other buildings within districts. It's outside the period of significance, so
Correct.
we shouldn't be borrowing from the red house to influence this design.
And I'm not saying we should necessarily.
Just to clarify, they're not making
If it's
any,
got anything good to contribute, we should use it. If it doesn't. have
No, I
anything
don't
to
think so. I think if it's outside of our purview,
So I think this is for deliberation.
yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
We do
Sorry, I
have
thought we
some
did.
public comment, so.
Yeah, I do see public comment, so let's do that.
Okay, yeah, let's go through those then, if that's all right.
Mr. Farley, you should be able to unmute. And if you could start with the name and address, that'd be great.
Okay, great. My name's Dick Farley, 2500 Walnut Street. I'm co-chair of the Lodo District, Inc. We are opposing this application because we have not had a chance to have it presented to us by the developer and the architect, which is typical for our ability to understand it and our effort to either support or not support an application. We're a little bit behind the 8 ball on this. For some reason, we were not aware of the first application. We would very much like to have Mr. Morris come present to us. I think we have perhaps some concerns about the amount of breaking up of the facade, with particularly along Blake Street. As Mr. Morris said, this is basically a big brick solid that's broken up by the metal facade panels. But I think what happens is when you have too many of these breakups, you get slivers of brick, like at the northeast corner of the building along Blake, that don't look like buildings. In fact, the way that the facade has been broken up is almost like strips of brick wallpaper between metal wallpaper. I don't mean to be dismissive of that, but there is a real trick to breaking up a larger building with different materials, and I think that's our concern would be that the amount is of the metal paneling is a little bit too much.
Dick, you are out of time, so I'll ask you to wrap it up, please.
Okay, no, thanks. That's if we could have a presentation, that'd be terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Crystal, any follow-up?
Yeah, so I would just say we received that email, I'll say a day or two ago. So we forwarded it on, and the applicants did respond and said they were willing to meet with them. So I guess maybe they just weren't aware of phase one. And just for background, this project was originally reviewed and approved different design in 2016. So I think that there was also that standing approval, and then they came back because it was a whole different design and team. Just for clarity, and also for your clarity, Jim, about the red house. If you're worried about the use or anything like that, we don't have purview over use. It's part of this package because they're gonna be using it for the hotel, but there are no actual exterior improvements planned for that structure. It will stay as it is on Wazee Street, which is why I left it largely out of the presentation for us to focus on the phase two infill design.
Thanks, Crystal. All right, opening it up for deliberation. What does everybody think? I'm gonna come grab the materials.
Yeah, sorry.
Looking at that column in question, I do question that one pilaster coming down. Feels a little spindly to like quote support that whole brick mass above if it's just at the one corner. So that's my initial thought with that, and I understand the logic of the glass wrapping the porte cochere in that context. So, I don't know, I understand staff's perspective, but I'm not sure that column would make much of a difference.
Actually share your concern, Nick. I kind of think that if it was just the one column there by the lobby, that it would feel
Kind of like it wants to
or-
fall
or
over
off
that way.
proportion, and you almost, again, like you would need one on the corner, which I think the package has established is challenging with the site triangle and the requirements from Doty. Or then also adding, like you need to repeat it down the alley so that felt like a mass. So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with the staff recommendation to add that little column. Because I think it would feel on a kind of wonky. Like I feel like we need several of them there across the street, or we need to anchor it more, but just one little pilaster isn't enough
Yeah.
to beef it up.
I agree.
Sorry, are the renderings slightly different, that the ones that we were presented today than what's in the package dated March 12th?
So,
Okay,
yeah, and I think the package that we got included the formats and context that we reviewed. It's like that first 50 pages was the formats and context that we already looked at. And so the renderings that we looked at today are like the very end of the packet.
And I think the
okay, wait.
major update is kind of to the coloring of that weathered steel
Yeah,
at the 6th level, which is in T3, I believe.
which is much better than had the orangey that it looks
Can I
like.
make a comment? So they sent me a whole new updated package and I said, you can't change your application that's going forward. But I said they could use updated renderings if that better reflected their materials. So that's what they showed you on their presentation.
But
So that's why it looks slightly different.
It's not
from the
a change of
application.
architecture, it's
No.
just a refinement of the material
Yes.
color.
Which you have the physical samples here in front of you.
And this is much better than the orangey color. I think that's one I'll put that too.
Oh, I can see it.
Are we allowed to consider the usage of the alley or not?
I'm not quite clear on your question. We do consider how the building interacts with the alley. But we don't specifically look at use and whether or not that alley is a active usable alley for Doty and garbage trucks and things of that nature. I know we have several alleys that are converting over to private space and being activated. But we have somewhat limited purview into how those alleys are converted, if that's your question.
Oh, that further confuses it actually.
But I don't think that's proposed in this packet today, so if that
Well,
was something proposed for
Have
later.
they considered the fact that that at least two of the buildings are used as entry and exit way for people that live in the buildings?
I'll just chime in
And
for
would that-
Brittany,
would
Jim,
that-
because
I guess
don't-
the
I don't
question
know
is,
that
would that
that's-
be something that we would consider?
I don't know that that's really our purview. I think those
Okay.
things of like where curb cuts are and where access is are really driven by Doty.
Okay.
I would note that they have made
By
the standard
us.
2-foot contribution to the alley. It's gonna widen the alley, which is a requirement now from the city. So I think in terms of what this development contributes to that additional 2-foot width in terms of functionality is a consistent thing that everybody's doing, but it
Yeah.
definitely does help with the performance of the alley.
That's fair.
I mean, I'm not involved in this project, but I suspect that they were limited on options for access, vehicular access.
And we did approve just an additional project which had to do with the opposite corner of the block. But was a project we looked at, oh gosh, months ago. And that was on the 17th or the 18th and Market Street. 18th and Blake, I guess it was. We looked at one down there, which was a minor project. We approved it right away.
Yeah,
That was. Anyway, that's fine.
I'm inclined to agree on the pilaster. I think that the expression of the mass floating, it's definitely a contemporary expression, but it feels appropriate, kind of sculpturally, if you like. I do feel that and I don't know if we can pull the elevations up here so we can look at them, but it does feel a little bit like the base of that mass is a little thin to sort of like terminate that volume. And I wonder if you are looking at, and this is going to get to the point of sort of discussion, but if you are looking at having to drop that soffit anyway from a from it insulating the underside of that slab standpoint. That part of that could be the investigation of lowering that canopy just very slightly to align with that soffit so that that can remain clean, and just a little bit more mass that might result from that at the base of that brick volume might help a little bit with the sense of how the thing terminates itself. I think part of the disconcerting piece of it in the views is maybe just how thin it feels at its base. And it does also feel like that canopy's pretty high, so if that canopy could, that section could lower, and I'm looking at the 17th Street elevation. I don't know, I'm getting into suggestions, and I don't want to design it for you, but in terms of just how that, just the thickness of the brick base on the right versus the thinness of it on the left, on the thick one on the left is actually terminating a pretty large voltage.
Yeah.
Potentially dropping the canopy maybe in between there. There's a way to sort of get a slightly more satisfying resolution at the base of that mass that would help it feel like it's got a little bit more substance.
Yeah, I agree with that. To your point, John, I don't know that that's something that
No.
we can tie an approval to, but I think that,
I mean, it sounds like you're telling us there's something that you need to address there anyway, which is the alignment of that soffit relative to insulation. So there's something you're gonna be coming back to us with around that, whether it's louver or to staff.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure how we frame all this, but yeah.
I think it would depend on the extent of alterations based on what they need to do
Yeah.
and discussion today. So it's hard to say definitively, like.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel that you have sufficient amount of information to review this application, you could always continue it to a date certain.
That's probably my only major comment relative to, I think, same as the staff's major focus is just the termination of that, like the completion of that box relative to the full issue. I would say, I would also want to be convinced a little bit about the durability of standalone aluminum fins in a location like that against a porte cochere that's heavily trafficked.
at least the verticals. Yeah.
Maybe it's replacing those with a steel component or doing something slightly different there without the glass in them and the softness of that metal. You know, I know they're extrusion, so they're robust, but you know, it's a pretty exposed condition. So that might be another thing just to think through. Well, the idea of continuing the screen, I like. I think it's just it's more maybe just a durability.
Yeah, yeah. Even though that's that added curb cut there has gone away from the floor mass and context and the entrances off of the alley.
Yeah.
It is still visually fairly open. People have done stranger things than hop curbs and run into buildings.
I do think that transparency from the lobby is super important in ensuring that space and the soffit condition are super important in ensuring that space feels positive.
Yeah.
I know it'll be managed hard because it's a hotel, so that's good, but I agree that sort of glazed relationship is super important.
I'm kind of going back to the comment that the previous application made, or will we be seeing lighting at a later date on this building too, that we would look at that kind of porte cochere illumination?
So that is something we do have purview over. Again, like generally speaking, lighting is something we can review administratively.
Okay.
But again, if you don't feel you have sufficient information and would like that lighting, you could continue it to date certain with conversations with the applicant. They could include those details if you feel that the lighting really impacts how that space is or is not appropriate for this design detail submittal.
And is it at the discretion of staff if something reaches a level where it needs to come back as opposed to us needing a continuation?
Yeah, it's generally, so anything approved with conditions is generally reviewed at the staff level, provided it meets the general intent of the commission's approval and conditions. If staff do not feel it's meeting those conditions, we return it to the commission. If you continue it, you would be continuing it because you, as the commission, do not feel you have enough information to sufficiently review the submittal, say for instance, the lighting, wanting to know what those louvers look like, that canopy detail changing, those kinds of things can, do merit continuance there. You can also deny the project. It's similar to a continuance because it wouldn't be a total denial of this design details. But in terms of how staff determine if projects require commission level review or staff level review, that's outlined in the design guidelines.
Well, that's a tricky one. One last, I don't know if it's a question for the applicant or maybe staff, or maybe I missed my chance, but on page 80, there's a landscape plan illustrating paver design that includes the alley. Is that happening?
I mean, they have that spec. I didn't really go into that because I feel like that's more Dottie's purview. And what they would require, they're gonna have to meet no matter what, so I didn't really go into it so much. But the part that's on the site, like we would have purview over, obviously, in the Port Cochere area.
Yeah, we do have purview over the sidewalk in lower downtown and the paver materials. Our streetscape guidelines are from 1991, which are quite outdated, and do recommend things that are not considered best for tree health and growth. But those guidelines do talk about creating a paver kind of entry detail, using traditional paving materials and things of that nature. So again, if that's something you feel like you don't have sufficient information on.
No, I think when we're talking about grounding, you've got, I think those pavers seem to ground the project in a way that we haven't talked about yet. And I think to your point of what are they doing for the building entries and exits, I see what they're attempting to do, something that I think goes way above and beyond what you might ordinarily do, or what Dottie might want you to do in an alley. And I think the materiality that's shown here does help to kind of
It makes the two properties more
coalesce the whole
contiguous, yeah.
design, if they can get the interior encroachments to do that.
That came up last meeting, and I raised the issue of what do we do about handicapped and that sort of thing, and was told that we've got no, as I understand it, we have no control over that. That's, they obey the 1989 rules, and that's it. Whenever they decide to do it, it's apparently fine. Within reason, of course.
How's everybody else feeling in terms of approach?
terms of a motion.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
what direction to take it in terms of degree of comfort. I'm, personally, it feels like the focus is on the approach to terminating that base of the brick mass. I think it feels like we're relatively well aligned on the fact that maybe isolated pilasters is not the right approach. I guess I'm interested in others' degree of comfort or otherwise with what's shown in the termination currently in the group, and this idea that there's something else that might happen here relative to new ring or some other thing that may come about.
I would say my opinion, this is me, that, and I don't know how you kind of decouple some of these things on the conditional, but I have a sufficient level of comfort with what's been presented, such that if there is something significant that we don't see here that merits, staff recommending it come back to us, I understand that, but on the basis of this pilaster and the dimensional issues, I guess I have a comfort level with the conditionals being on the dimensions, but an approval of the approach with regard to that
Yeah, I mean,
pilaster.
we
without
look at
condition.
the package that's here in front of us. I mean, the applicant kind of talked about a few things of, you know, some things that might get changed and those would be things that would need to be revised on their package. And as long as we feel that staff, we have a comfort level that that's something that staff could approve or make the call on whether we need to see it again. You know, we look at the package that we have to review, and if we feel comfortable making a motion on what we have, we let those things they're still looking at come at a later date, either to staff or to us. Like you have something to say, Andy.
I was gonna say, I'm more than happy to throw a wrench in the conversation. I have overall comfort level with the project as designed. I think I agree with everybody saying it's like, I think the added pilaster between the lobby and the portico share creates kind of this off balance situation. And in my head, and I don't know if other designers in the room make the realization that the way this building is constructed is different than the way buildings were constructed at the turn of the century. And so like I can make that rationale, and so that makes it work. Where I'm throwing the wrench into the conversation is if the applicant would be open to a continuance for two reasons. One, it allows them to go and talk to the neighborhood, have that conversation, make sure that they're comfortable with it. And even though we're not beholden to it, I think it would go a long way to making friends with the neighborhood organization as well as getting buy-in so that when we do approve it, you know, there's no hard feelings. The second part is it sounds like there's some ambiguity about whether or not they need louvers at that portico shear area, and allows them a little bit of time to maybe, does the canopy drop in order to create a thicker base, or do they keep the canopy its height and add louvers? But then what that does is it allows us to take a look at it, and it doesn't have to go to staff, and staff doesn't have to do the heavy lifting on that.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason. I mean, I would be comfortable with approving it, but from a political standpoint, I'd be like, if continuance allow them to do A, B, and C, just to make sure that it's all locked up and there's no issues with it going forward.
I'll ask the applicant, would you be comfortable with the continuance to do the items that Andy's suggesting? Meet with the neighborhood and study those louvers at the garage?
I'm just wondering if we get down in the ground, while you talk about the louvers, about the water issues that, I don't know if we're talking about the structure, I don't know, but I think it's something more deeper than that too, because there's some water, you know, we got rivers and I don't know if that's involved.
So we do a continuance.
Yes,
we'll
so
need a
to answer
date-
your
A
question,
date certain.
yes, I think a date certain would be preferable, and a continuance would be, we welcome that. I think
Okay.
our ownership group would as well. I appreciate Crystal mentioning that we did get the letter and we did reach out. We have not heard back from the design group, but I think that is good to meet with them, and we'd love to do that. And we can make that happen in that time frame, whatever that time frame is. And, you know, certainly, John, appreciate your comments about, you know, I think we were fussing with the height that portico share, because at one point it incorporated more of the loading, which is now it's more of a vehicle drop off. So we have some play there that we did originally think we had as far as the height. And certainly we haven't gone to the extent of engineering the space to know what we really need as far as the depth of a plan. It's just knowing that we have to have conditioned space, and condition that slab for the guest rooms up above that, which is anticipating that. So I don't know that we'd have that all resolved, but we could certainly architecturally and aesthetically understand what that would want to be and allow for that wiggle room for what we might need to drop that slab or drop that plenum space in. So I guess a long-winded answer to say we'd be happy to do that.
So I would recommend at earliest a continuance to June 6th, because the filing deadline for the May meeting is this Tuesday. And that doesn't feel like sufficient time to address all these conditions, as that is 3 days, essentially 3 working days. However, if you can get a complete application to Crystal by April 9th at noon, we could continue to the May 2nd meeting, but again, I would recommend looking at the June 6th meeting, which the filing deadline for that is May 14th at noon.
And to be clear, that meeting doesn't need to happen, obviously, before the filing deadline with the neighborhood. That could happen anytime between now and when we come back together.
But there are a lot of architectural details that sound like
Yeah.
need to be addressed for Crystal to review.
I just want to make a comment that the comments we heard from them sounded like they weren't good with the modulation. And we approved that basically in phase 1. So I don't know what that is really gonna accomplish. I mean, they can hear them and stuff, or maybe they can speak to the phase 2 elements, but if they change their phase 1 based on comments from whoever they speak to, then they have to come back to you for phase 1 and 2. So just FYI.
Yeah,
So let's focus on the continuance state. Still, the conversation with the neighborhood is a separate thing, and how they move forward with that is a separate thing. But how are you feeling about a continuance for May 2nd or June 6th with the filing deadlines in mind and the terms of the architectural features that you have mentioned in terms of the louvers and things of that nature?
I have no problems with the continuance. Provided some of the concerns I raised are addressed.
Sure.
So, and that could be as broad as you want to make it.
Jim, I would note there is a lot of contextual analysis in the first round application at the front of
Yeah.
this.
There is, and I agree with
Just
that. I agree with you on that too.
So we're gonna confer with the applicant on that date.
Yeah, so we would like to go in the earlier date. to
Okay.
Keep our timeline going, and I think we expressed that as well in our letter back to the Urban Design Committee. Unfortunately, it'll be a quick play to get in front of them between now and then, but we're gonna go ahead and submit on the earlier date and then have every intent to get together with them for their concerns. And
Just so you're clear, the filing deadline is April 9th, and you should clearly address these architectural elements that the commission is continuing this application for specifically.
And whether or not public interface is required by then is up to
I mean, we highly encourage it. It's not a requirement in the lower downtown historic district to formally refer applications. But we do highly encourage that outreach, so.
and that's, I've heard that in the past and we've done it in the past.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I mean, I think to Brittany's point, the important thing is that the continuance is looking at those architectural features that we've talked about primarily there at the porte cochere. And then if the applicant is able to meet with the RNO.
Getting those things resolved as quickly as possible makes a lot of sense.
so that date certain is May 2nd, 2024. If a commissioner would like to make a motion to continue to May 2nd.
one more thing, I just wanna, and slap my hand if I could go too far. That if the RNO is Crystal was getting at, makes recommendations that the form-mass changes, that really is gonna throw off your timeline, so just look at the details at this point. And if they make recommendations to massage details, that's one thing, but if for whatever reason, they start tweaking with the mass, that could throw you back into form, mass, and scale.
Yeah.
So, and that was approved in, what was that, March or
April 23.
April? No, that's not what it was.
Yeah, it was like a year ago.
Yeah, that was already approved, so you have approval on that. I would make recommendations that you don't play with what was already been approved. If they make tweaks on, you know, let's massage your detail at your window to be 1/8 of an inch as opposed to a 1/2 inch. That is one thing, but if they say, oh, we want 4 bays of brick instead of 2, that could throw your schedule off.
And that's up to the applicant if they wish to address any comments from the RNO
Yeah.
relating to mass and scale. We do have an approved mass and scale, and they can move forward with that. So
Yeah,
that's
that's the
a
only reason I brought
separate
it up.
conversation.
Yeah.
And, but yes, if, again, the meeting date is May 2nd, 2024.
Can I ask Crystal from just general site development plan, building permit, where things are with this project?
I think they have an SDP in that's being reviewed, but obviously they can't final an SDP until we give a phase 2 final approval. And typically we do get a lot of revisions or minor changes that come back to us. And as Brittany has mentioned, if there are larger changes to like street facades, we do typically bring it back. If they're very small, minor things and vents, we usually just review those things administratively.
But is this otherwise, is this kind of the last thing, or are there numerous other
It's
things
the last
that
for
are
the
still-
design, but no, they're still going through the SDP
This is
process.
definitely
Yeah,
not
it's
the
not
last
the
Not
end.
critical
Staff
path
will
to
look
the
at this
SCP.
project
No.
for almost another year
Okay.
probably.
Alright.
But we will probably, unless Brittany or Crystal see something big, it might be the last time we see it.
Yes.
Yes.
Understood.
Somebody care to make a motion?
Since
I'm not gonna.
Since it's your first day, we wouldn't make you do that. I will make the motion since I'm the one that threw the wrench and everything. And feel free to make friendly motions after this. I move to provide a continuance for application 2024 COA-174 for the infill of phase 2 to May 2nd. With the focus on the applicant to study the porte cochere along 17th Avenue, potential louvers and canopy design, and to make the recommendation that, or the encouragement that the applicant reach out to the Lodo district for discussions and potential
For discussion.
Thank you.
Can I get a second on that?
Okay, Jim seconded. Make a friendly clarification. That's May 2nd, 2024 meeting. Just clarifying the year.
Approved. Sorry.
Do you accept, Jim?
All right, all those in favor of a continuance?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any abstentions? Any opposed? All right, continuous is unanimous. Okay, do we have any business or discussion items?
We do not have any business or discussion items. Obviously, Nick is, this is his first meeting, so welcome to the commission. Nick, Tom's term is officially up in May and he will not be returning to the meeting, my understanding. So I'm still actively recruiting for his position and one more position, which I'm totally blanking on right now. So that's, if you know anyone who is interested, they're both at large positions. Generally, we like resident or contractor, but they are at large positions. So if you know of anyone interested, please send them my way.
That's great. All right, thanks, Brittany. I adjourn the meeting at 10:21. Everyone.
Thank you, staff.